A record player should be rectangular and should go on your shelf, and you should put your records on it.
I think my first perception of what a record player was what I now realize is a gramophone. Like, so the old school record players where they have the big, almost looks like a tuba coming out of it.
It was about this big, and the records themselves were about this big.
My first one was a piece of shit.
Mine is leather, and it looks like an actual briefcase.
There's tiny little speakers built in the unit, boombox kind of record player.
But now, obviously, it's the high-fidelity record players.
Anywhere from a small record player like this to a big stereo.
Like a half cube, something about this big, and it has like a clear top that you can't really see through all the way.
It's just a small little box. You wouldn't expect anything to really come out of it, but once you set the needle down, the little box becomes a powerhouse for all this incredible sound.
Rotating at 78 revolutions per minute, the first vinyl record played Yankee Doodle in 1878. 101 years later, vinyl record sales peaked at just above 1 billion units sold in a calendar year. Cassette tapes, released the year before, would soon become the dominant medium before the advent of CDs in the mid-1980s. Vinyl record sales appeared non-existent by 1993 when units sold fell below 500,000.
There wasn't but one person in the whole neighborhood that had one of those, and we would gather like on Saturday night, and the whole neighborhood would come in, families would come in, and we would all sit out in the yard.
We went down to Seaside. There's a record store down there, and one of my friends, Casey, took a picture with the album, Mumford & Sons' new album. I had never thought of current music being put on vinyl, and I just thought that was really crazy and cool. And that kind of planted the seed for me to think about getting a record player.
It started when my stepsister would come over, and she'd always have all her vinyl and her record player.
One time we were at my house and we turned off all the lights and we got a bunch of candles.
And they would just kind of sit in the basement and listen to records. And it was kind of cultish in a way.
And we just jammed into the music of, I don't even remember, I think we were listening to Bon Iver or something.
But it seemed fun, and it seemed like a good way to get to know everybody and just make good friends. When she did do candles one time and it was completely lights out, definitely cultish.
I collect them. I probably have about, at this point, probably maybe anywhere between 12 and 14,000 records. So
people in the neighborhood gathered together and just played the music.
I asked for a record player for my 14th birthday, and that was my first record player that I used forever. It was like a shitty all-in-one unit, and after that I was addicted, I suppose.
Mother had asked me what I wanted, and I told her I wanted that. Well, they gave me that, and my sister went with them so she could pick out the records that I would like.
I started Criminal Records when I was 19, and did a little bit of college, did a lot of high school, and worked at a mom and pop record shop since I was 13. As a lot of my friends were heading to college, and I was doing community college, I just felt like sticking with what I knew.
Kind of goes way back. When I was younger, I used to dance a lot. So in my ballet classes, the music we would have would be on record for our exercises.
I probably got my first record when I was maybe 6 years old. So that would be 1980.
Always the same thing, but it kind of had that feeling of, okay, we do one exercise, and then she'd flip the record over, okay, we do an adagio now.
A buddy of mine bought a record player, a really nice one, and I thought it was just a really cool piece to have in a house, so I thought, hey, I might do that.
What is your favorite record?
I don't have an answer for that question. That's what is...
So if I went to your house and said I'm taking every single record except one, you just say...
If you came to my house and told me you were taking my records, I would beat the shit out of you.
Simon and Garfunkel, Parsley, Sage, Rosemary, and Thyme.
My favorite record is this one I found pretty soon before I moved to Atlanta. I've been here about 2.5 years. And I found it looking through just like a whole bunch of old ones, and it's like the South's greatest hits, and it has Allman Brothers and a bunch of other cool ones, and just kind of, you know, made me excited to move here.
The Beatles' Abbey Road.
One of my dad's old records, and it was The Doors' greatest hits.
Hatful of Hollow by the Smiths.
I love Nat King Cole.
It had a couple scratches on it, but all the songs played through perfectly, and the first time I played it, it was priceless.
He was a black artist and had the most mellow singing voice that you would ever want to sing. And I love Nat King Cole. And my dad didn't like me listening to Nat King Cole, but he did. My mother said, leave her alone.
It Takes a Nation of Millions to Hold Us Back. It's Public Enemy's second record.
I got kicked out of college and lost my job, so I had to go home I had to move back to my folks' house for about 9 months. So I didn't have to pay rent. So during that time, I had some extra money, and I was hitting this place like 4 times a week, as often as I could, sometimes twice a day. And I wanted to work here really bad, so I begged them until they gave me an internship. I had 3 other jobs and an internship with Criminal on Saturdays and Sundays, and I just waited around until I started making real money here.
Vinyl sales, dormant for 20 years, increased 9-fold from 2007 to 2014, reaching 9.2 million units sold, a number not surpassed in the previous 20 years. With music mediums becoming more accessible and portable, artists, labels, and market researchers wonder why vinyl record sales have resurged, a question music enthusiasts eagerly answer.
A lot of people do talk about the science of the sound and the absence of fidelity with MP3s and streaming.
There's some truth to certain records being recorded with the intention of being put on vinyl.
I know it's the sound, it sounds better, but I have a cruiser, so my speakers aren't as good.
Old records sound better on vinyl.
A better sound. You get a more mellow sound on a record than you do in the CDs and DVDs and all of that stuff.
You have your turntable off and you put your finger on it and you turn the record around and put your ear to it. You can still hear the song coming out.
There are a lot of people that are really interested in something physical, reading a book, listening to a record.
That piece of wax has the songs engraved into it, whether or not you have something electronic turned on.
It's also like getting to hold it, and it's like every record has a story.
I like that it's mechanical and that you can see it in front of you.
This is very tangible. It's something that you kind of have an experience with.
Because it's so visceral and physical.
Geez, I just can't imagine being excited about a new file downloaded to an object.
Probably the artwork, because I'm a very visual person. CD artwork is smaller.
The artwork is big.
You always want to stay where you are because it's like, we already have this and it's good, let's keep it.
I think it's kind of a mix of nostalgia, so people love the past, and love vintage things.
There's always people that are gonna like want to stick with the old and like refuse to accept the new.
And they haven't gotten out of that routine.
There were people that wanted to be like retro and go back and be like, look, this was cool too.
I think there's something about records that I keep in a memory up here more than these things now. You just stick it into a little pot and push a button and it runs. And I'd much rather sit down to a good record player.
Because it's hip now. It's retro. The 90s are retro now. The 80s have still been retro. I mean,
If you went to a dormitory in 2015, it would be the exception. The cool chicks have turntables.
College students are always going to be like several years ahead of what normal people understand to be pop culture anyway, so they already know they're able to pick up on it really quick.
I don't think people of a certain age want to be identified with what their parents can do.
it's a novelty thing to a lot of people, I think, which is why, Best Buy carries records now, Urban Outfitters carries records now, For a lot of kids, it's like buying a t-shirt. It doesn't feel like a novelty thing to me, but I can understand why it does for some other people.
It's a hipness factor that's not faddish, it's completely resonant and real. A record was like a movie. And like you wouldn't take Empire Strikes Back and just go to this scene where the rebels were attacking the AT-ATs. And like, that's my favorite song. That's my favorite scene of the movie. You'd kind of want to know what happened before and after.
Rather than just getting the song, which is great, but you get everything.
The single-driven marketplace like iTunes or radio, just kind of reading you the best chapter of the book, and the rest of the book's probably pretty interesting.
Each album tells a story, so you get to hear the entire story.
I want to know how the story started, and I want to know how the story ended. So I'm going to give any artist the opportunity to at least listen to the whole thing first, and then choose my favorites.
You get the entire album. You're not just getting one song that you like, and you pretty much have to listen to it in the order that the album goes in.
It forces you to listen to the entire record because you're setting it at the beginning. You don't click through it.
At first it was hard because like you can't pause the song, you can't hit next, so you kind of just have to like learn and listen to it as it goes.
You have that not lack of choice, but it's lack of the burden of choice. We have such a huge history of used records, from our grandparents to our parents to, oh gosh, I guess people my age.
I prefer new records unless it's a nostalgic old record. The more you play a record, the more worn down it gets. So if it's not nostalgic, you might as well get something that's going to sound better.
A lot of my friends like to buy new records, but I'm definitely someone that likes to buy like older vintage ones.
Chances are there's a really nice collection in somebody's basement or extra room, or hopefully in the living room and they never exited that living room.
It's like the story that each record tells when it's old.
I prefer if it's just vinyl, period.
In one word. Ooh.
You're saying describing the complexity of something in like simpler terms than that can happen in.
Immersive.
Music.
Dusty. Because all of my records are really dusty, which is really bad.
Interactive.
Whimsical.
Enchanting.
Gives me a lot of peace.
Soothing.
Refreshing.
Orgasmic? Is that what you're looking for?